Now with the foundation of Islam, with Muhammad eventually going back to Mecca and taking the city and spreading his word and those of the people around him, we're going to have the creation now of a state that's increasingly identified by the religion by which many of the warriors are united, which will be Islam. And as these Muslim warriors spread outwards, one of the key factors to take into account is with the death of Muhammad in 632, who's in charge here? Who's going to take the next role in uniting and controlling the Muslim forces? Who is going to be the one who will lead both essentially religion and state as they had been unified under Muhammad? And that is where we're going to have the creation of the idea of what's called the Caliph or the Caliphate. A caliph is going to be the one who will be the successor to Muhammad, both to his religious authority as well as to his civic and governmental authority. And then the territory controlled by a caliph is sometimes referred to as a caliphate. All right? So just so we have our vocabulary down. And here's a simple map showing you some color coding as we take a look at the origins of what's happening within Islam. There is then, of course, the beginnings of the movement here in what you know as modern-day Saudi Arabia, and then over time, as you see the time frames here, it is going to spread outwards and in many ways go different directions, all right? And we'll be talking more about the solidification of the ideas within Islam as well as its spread. Remember, they were very quickly introduced in the last segment, but there are 5 central pillars to Islam. Much like you could go back into the Christian theology or to the ideas of Judaism or the ideas of, say, the belief system of, the Phoenicians or the Egyptians or anybody else. All those different societies had their own organized religious faith with their various supporting documents, concepts, priesthoods, and people who could interpret, of course, the words and the meanings. Everything from the priestess who identified what your fate was at the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece, all the way through to the Roman penchant, the Roman belief that you could foretell the future sometimes by the flight of birds. There's lots revolving around the idea here of religion and signs, but within Islam, we have essentially 5 central pillars that are referred to. The belief in Allah and that Muhammad is the prophet. Now remember, think about it. Within both the Christian and the Jewish traditions that came earlier, in each of them there had been people who had delivered the message, people who were either identified in the Hebrew tradition as prophets, as divinely inspired messengers, or in other words, lots of different people within the Christian and the Jewish tradition who had been that carrier of the good news, the one who had warned and admonished or reminded people of their duty to their religion. And in this case, Muhammad is going to be the messenger of Allah as the chief monotheistic God. There will be, of course, prayer 5 times a day as a reminder, a structural reminder that that is where your duty lies and that you should constantly remember who you are and your place in the world and your faith. Not unlike, like I said, other religious groups that do call upon daily prayer amongst their followers to remind themselves of the central cores of their belief and to keep them moving in the right direction, towards the righteous, towards the good, towards the fulfillment, towards the idea that you can strive in life to be a better follower, a better believer, a better member of society, and that all those are reinforced in the idea of prayer. There's also the concept of Ramadan, a special month of the year that is set aside for fasting, where a true follower, a true believer, will not be eating between sunrise and sunset. Once again, this is an older idea that existed in other different religious groups. For example, if you know a little bit more about some of the specifics of Jewish history, there was a group called the Essenes, who were very ascetic, who were denying themselves food and drink and finding ways to sort of punish their body in order to focus their mind, their soul on salvation and the needs of their religious faith. Or in the more modern-day Christian practice, say, of giving up specific foods during Lent, for example. That same kind of legacy of foregoing or giving up something that is of creature comfort to help focus the mind on your true duty, on your true faith. There's also within Islam, like I said and noted earlier, the Kaaba as a central shrine and Mecca as a central place to go back and live through the life of Muhammad, to review the ideas and concepts of the faith and to have a physical reminder of what is necessary to be done. And in my context, I think about lots of especially elderly people in America who for one reason or the other feel the need to go and travel to, say, Bethlehem in Israel or on the West Bank during especially the month of December. And that is part of that whole pilgrimage idea. And we'll read also about pilgrimage ideas in the Middle Ages, where people would express their faith by trying to go back to the places that are important to them and their faith, and reconnecting to the physical will connect them to the spiritual. And Jerusalem and other places will serve that purpose for the Jews and for Christians, but also for Muslims as well. And then, of course, the last one that was mentioned was a sense of charity, a brotherhood of all man, an alms, a need to take care of your brother, which is inherent in other religious groups as well, that in many ways practice this sense of sharing is caring. Now, the next step is to think about, after Muhammad dies in 632, there's not a strict structural system. There's not a series of elected bishops or rabbis or officially sanctioned priests. With the death of Muhammad, the question is, well, now who's going to lead the movement? Who's going to be the one who will help us interpret and understand both the religious and the governmental aspects, the military aspects of what we need to do? Who's going to be the caliph? Who's going to be the successor? Now, very early on in the years after the death of Muhammad, that is a key question, and it's going to be resolved in two different ways. One, many within the movement are wanting to see a blood relative, a successor of Muhammad, to come from his blood relatives, to come from the people who are around him, family members, extended family members, find a connection, a blood connection, a legal or connection back to Muhammad as the leader. And that is going to be the increasing movement called the Shia. They're looking for a divine and inspired leader within the bloodline of Muhammad and his family, and that's where they want to see the leadership come from. In opposition to them in many ways are essentially what are going to be called the Sunni Muslims, who are simply looking for somebody who's a quality leader, who is going to be devout, who's going to be successful, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a blood relative. And that's essentially the schism that is between the two groups. That's the breakdown in the initial unity of the movement. But then if you think about other movements like the Christian movement, it also endures lots of breaks and schisms as we go forward. There will be a multitude of Christianities as we look into the future of medieval Europe. Same sort of thing within, say, Judaism. Many different understandings and interpretations of how things are going to go. So the idea of an initial religious movement staying unified is of course rare, but it also is a sense that people are taking very seriously and very, interpreting very carefully what they understand. They want to do their best, they want to engage, and they want to be able to figure it out. They're going to come to sometimes different conclusions about the ideas and concepts of each other, although they're going to stay pure to what they think is their understanding of what is right or wrong. That seems to be something that happens amongst many different religious groups in their formation, and like I said, we'll get back to this as we go into Europe with multiple Christianities by the time we finish this course and are talking about the Protestant Reformation and the Counter-Reformation of Roman Catholicism in Western Europe. Another key concept that is going to be emerging is one that is sort of under the title of jihad. And it's an interesting concept because it's interpreted in a couple of different ways. One is that the striving, the internal personal striving to live up to the word, to live up to the needs of what the Quran had provided, to live up to the demands of the 5 pillars, to, in other words, be as devout and sincere as possible, is a personal struggle on a daily basis. And that's something anyone who is part of a large faith movement would understand, that concept of trying to be true to the word, true to your faith, and to follow through as best you can. People fail, people err, and that's expected, but you're supposed to struggle to be as good as you can. Struggle to be what's necessary as a believer, as a follower, as a true adherent to the faith. That is one concept of jihad. Another part of it is coming out of the tradition of Saudi Arabia, of the area where Muhammad had been practicing. There had been an older tradition where there was this idea that should someone attack you for who you are, you of course had the ability to strike back. And that also becomes part of this concept of jihad. It can be an internal struggle for purity and for following through, and it also can be in a sense of a protective ability to physically take action to assure your own safety and your ability to follow your faith. Those two kinds of concepts of jihad will move forward. We'll see them also come into play later on when we talk about the Christian Crusades. This idea that you can take a sanctioned sort of religious idea and use it both as an internal struggle for purity and for devotion, but also can use it externally against the enemies of your faith. And we'll get back to that idea as we move forward. Also, as you saw very quickly with that map about the Caliphate, the Muslim armies are very successful in expanding outwards. They are very, very good at finding and settling areas and overseeing the local peoples. And the map projected up here is essentially where the Umayyad Caliphate has set itself up by this time period. And the Umayyad family was the one that had controlled, the Caliph had taken control in the 660s of being the leaders of Islam, and until they are dissolved in the year 750, they're going to be headquartering their version of Umayyad Islam from Damascus for the next 100 years or so until they're going to decay in 750. But this map gives you a sense of how widely spread Islam had come in the century or so after the death of Muhammad. It is stretching all the way from the edge of France, all across North Africa, to the edge of the Byzantine Empire, and now out into Central Asia. It will spread even further as we go forward. This is simply the first step in the creation. But the idea then was always going to be that one caliph was going to lead Islam, both as a religion and as a political and economic and military movement, and it was going to be focused on one place, and this place in Damascus. In time, what's going to happen, though, is that with the decay of authority and the challenges that are going to be put forth by other people within the movement, as well as external challenges, this united caliphate will eventually fall apart. Take a look at how early Islam is covered in your text. Take a look at its development and its spread to the age of the caliphate, and take also a look at the idea if there are any practice questions that can help you comprehend the larger issues here as Islam expands.